All right, good morning. It's midway through the week, Wednesday, and still cold around here. But man, what a great morning so far. And I've been meeting with my friends in England, and we're strategizing about helping parents and families over there. So I'm excited about that. We are in England. They're locked down because of the new strain of COVID. 2 months they're in lockdown. So the parents are freaking out just a tad because they're going to have their kids at home and they're trying to work from home and all of those issues. And so we're putting together a webinar program that just some free stuff to help them learn how to prepare for life at home with the kids and activities besides TV and video games. And so we're building a kind of a toolbox for parents over there, and excited about that. And anyway, so that's been up early this morning doing all of that, and now I'm ready to settle down with you guys and open up the Word and enjoy our morning together. So we're in Colossians chapter 3, and yesterday you remember that we looked at the concept of he says, since then you've been raised with Christ, set your mind on heaven. And we just talked about that focus that ought to be there, and how to step away from the world in that sense and not get focused in that. While we are in the world, we're not of the world. And so it's a difficult deal, isn't it, to consider yourself a kind of a disinterested third party, because it goes against everything that we have teaching and all of that. And we should live life passionately and be all in, just not all in the world, right? And so that's the thing. And this is what we've been looking at, and it's really powerful truth. So now he's moving into a section where he wants us to understand there's certain things that we have to put off. Now, this is a favorite topic of Paul's, and it really is about what we would call, it's a theological word, sanctification. It is about becoming holy, right? So the false teachers want to create an external issue, right? You've got you've got rules that you should keep. You've got then you should more asceticism. You should deny yourself, and then there's all of those issues of experience. You got to have a special experience and all of these things, all these external trappings. And so what the scriptures teach is that there are certain things we have to kill. We just have to kill it, right? So we want to talk about those things. Paul says it like this in the to the Ephesian church, chapter 4, I think verse 21. He says, put off the old man, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. Now, so when we died, when we died spiritually, when we came to Christ, we were, old things pass away, behold, all things become new. We have died to ourselves in Christ, raised to new life in Him. So there is the residual effects of the old man, though, and I think we've talked about this as we've gone through Colossians. There are residual effects of the old man that still linger, right? He's a dead man. We're carrying around this thing. We need to keep cutting off all those pieces till he's ultimately gone, right? We have to kill the whole thing off. And so to the Ephesian church, I like the way he says it there. This is kind of an abbreviated version. We're going to read it in just a minute. But in in Ephesians, he says, put off the old man. Why? Well, because it's being corrupted by its deceitful desires, right? That's what sin does. It corrupts us. It dangles things before us that we think will make us happy, and all it does is promote death. That's the flesh. That's what it does. Everything about the flesh is rolling toward death. Everything about the world, everything about Satan, he came to steal, kill, and to destroy, right? The world, its system is designed to do that. And so all of that is designed. And so he's letting us know that when you and I still get to choose whether we're gonna follow the flesh or we're gonna follow the Spirit. It's our choice. Paul is urging us here to not follow the flesh, to kill it, to put it off, to be done with it. To be done with sin is how John writes about it. But so Paul says this to the Ephesian church: put off the old man, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. Be made new in the attitude of your mind, right? So it's in our mind is where those attitudes are. Be made new in the attitude of your mind, and put on the new self, which is created to be like God in true righteousness and true holiness. So that's what he's after: a new heart, an outward activity that is in keeping with that. That's what righteousness and holiness is. So one is internal, one is external. So internally, We have been declared holy while he's in the process of making us so. So we become righteous. That is, we do right things. This is his point. And so he tells us then that and he goes through a list in Ephesians. And I'd really encourage you to go look at Ephesians 4 when we're done here, because it's a bigger picture, greater imagery that reminds us of the things that we should put off. So let's read this text, and then we're just going to look at a few little word studies and kind of see what we need to do. He says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature." Now, he's going to give me what those are. So it really is about misplaced love, right? This is what he's saying. The flesh will always gravitate toward a lesser love. It's a self-love that manifests itself in how we play it out. And so it's misplaced love. And so he says here, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature." So he wants to talk about how we have settled for lesser love, and here's where he goes. Sexual immorality. And so he talks about that at great length. It's not a secret that our world is infatuated with sex and anything outside the bounds of marriage, and we push those limits. We push those extremes, whether it's from what we watch on TV. You know, we've all grown accustomed to just assuming and seeing those things, right? And he's saying here, hey, listen, those are dead to you now. Sex is an incredible gift from a loving God, designed to meet the needs of two people for companionship, for comfort, for pleasure, for procreation. This is what it's designed for. But it's always meant to be in the bounds of one woman, one man, forever. And so anything out of that bound, is of the flesh. And so we just don't want to go there. We learned it will never satisfy. Temporarily, there may be some highs and lows, but it always brings death. That's what Solomon said about fornication and adultery and all of that. It leads to death. That road will always lead you to a terrible place. And so he says sexual immorality, impurity. That's just lesser. Impure means anything that's not holy. In the sexual realm, it's different than just sexual immorality. It's a broader term. Any impurity, whether it's in the sexual realm or anything in that deal. And he said, I want you to put those things off. Lust, see, and that moves from the physical activity of sexual immorality, and then just the general impurity where we think thoughts that we shouldn't think about sex and other things, to then lusting. That is not a physical aspect. It's just it dominates us. It controls us. We're consumed with sexual aspects in other areas. And he's really hammering this. And this is, look, everybody can act like we don't have a problem with that, and people don't have a problem with that. It's dominant in our world. The sex trafficking issue wouldn't be as big as it is if this wasn't a real deal. Divorce wouldn't be as rampant as it is if this wasn't a big deal. You understand? I mean, this is, let's don't act like we're above this. He's speaking of within our flesh, we have the ability and the capability to be sexually immoral, to have these impure thoughts that just continue to creep up, and then thoughts that are impure that we take hold of and we massage and we think about and we imagine, and that's what lust is. And so he says, listen, you got to stop that. You got to put that thing off, because it's death for you and me. So he says, these are the things that we have to be done with. Then he says, evil desires, right? Those again, misplaced desires, no longer in the sexual realm. He's just talking about out and about, whatever these evil desires are. And you know what that's like in your own mind, how you can have these evil desires. Well, I wish something that would happen to them. Now, we would never say that out loud, but there are times when we think, man, I wish karma would hit them or whatever. Those are evil desires where we want money for, we can pretend it's about other things, but we want money for whatever we're going to get out of something. Evil desires just are those things which aren't pleasing to the Lord. So we ask ourselves, is that pleasing to the Lord, right? That's the issue. And so in that sense, it's all sorts of addictions, because All things are lawful, Paul says, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but I won't be mastered by anything. I think those evil desires a lot of times is found in the manifestation of addictions. It's how we medicate ourselves, and it's totally destructive to us. Every addiction that you have, whether it's just food to drugs, alcohol, any of those things that owns you, it's a terrible thing. And so he says, listen, put that aside also. And then he says greed, which is idolatry. Anytime you start wanting things for you to find happiness in, whatever that greed is, it's not always just money. It could be power. It could be popularity. There's all sorts of things where we want things. That becomes an idol to you. If your whole goal is to be the most popular person on the planet, that's become an idol to you, and all of a sudden everything revolves around you. You see how that works? It's a terrible thing, right? But it's what a lot of people do. Go on social media. Everybody's trying to gain as many, get as popular as they can. Sometimes it's power, and power corrupts, and so we see that in politics today. Man, you've got people up there that are lingering and holding on to seats of power, and they're willing to do anything and everything to hold on to it. They'll sell their soul in order to stay in power. That's greed. That's idolatry. They now worship power. And then you've got money, right? So those are the areas that he speaks of here. And he says, listen, you can chase all that stuff. It's completely unhealthy for you and me as Christ followers to allow ourselves to get into that realm. And so he says, and then he warns us, because of these, the wrath of God is coming. That's what God's wrath is coming for. Why? Because it's idolatry. We have placed something else above God himself. That's the Ten Commandments. Literally, the Ten Commandments are broken down into two areas. Loving God, right? And so that's why the first four all deal with him, not taking the Lord's name in vain, not having any other gods before him, remembering the Sabbath. All of those things are designed to learn how to love God. When we choose sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, we have chosen to love something else. We have put something else in place above God. And then the last Ten Commandments, the six of them, are how we should love each other. This is why he shifts. So really, he's talking about the Ten Commandments from a practical perspective. And so he's saying, hey, when you do these things, God's wrath is coming because he hates idolatry. Now he's shifting to how we treat others, and he's going to talk about hate. So this is what he said. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived. We used to be like that, right? Now, some of you came to Christ early and young, and you didn't have a chance to really delve into the sexual things. But we do know that is what happens to us in our former life before Christ. That's the potential that was there. Then he says, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these. Anger. Now, anger is an emotion. And that's why Paul tells the Ephesian church, in your anger, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, lest you give Satan a foothold. Anger is an emotion just like anything else. So, I mean, we can't help. We laugh. Sometimes we can't help it. It just comes out. But anger misplaced and caused to linger will always create trouble. So we have to suppress it. We have to get rid of it. We have to not have that climbing up our back, because it literally gives Satan a foothold in our life. And so he says, listen, but now you must rid yourself also of these things. Anger. Now, anger left unchecked, without putting it away, will always manifest itself in two or three different ways. Anger left unchecked eventually will boil over, and there will be a rage that happens. And you're either going to go off on somebody physically, or you're going to go off on somebody in a slanderous way. But anger left unchecked will always manifest itself, and it's completely unloving. And this is what he's saying here. So you've got anger, and you don't deal with it. And it's just there underlying. What's going to happen next? This is a progression. Rage is going to take place. It's going to begin to boil and bubble, and it may take a bit, but it's there, and it's getting more and more and more. And then so there's this now, it's anger, because it's turned into rage, has this deep-seated hatred. That's what malice is. It's just, I don't like that. And every time that name of that person comes up, or every time that group comes up, there's this malice. There's this hatred. Like, we want to see their destruction. And so then what happens after that is slander moves in, and we can't help but just trash talk somebody. We see it in politics now, man. Pick your poison, whichever side you're on. this is what's happened. One side has gotten angry at the other. And so what's happening here is that there's a rage that's taking place. That's what you've seen really in violence that we've had for the past year. What happened recently, in Washington, we're just seeing these things. And then there's this deep-seated hatred. So no one can say anything good about anybody else. You see it played out right now in our political realm. And then we slander each other. So we take things that aren't true. We take things that are true. We maximize them, exploit them, and then just use it to trash everybody. It's disgustingly filthy. It's evil. It's unloving. It is unholy. And it's wrong on every level. And then he says, listen, and filthy language from your lips. He said what happens is the poison that's in your heart will come out in this filthiness of your mouth. It'll come out in so many different ways. So then he says, don't lie to each other. Since you've taken off the old self with practices, let's start being honest with each other. And then he says, and I put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of the Creator. And it's powerful. So this is where the goal is. This is where we're moving to. We're putting off the old man. We're putting on the new. If you'll read Ephesians 4, you'll see where he says, let him who steals steal no longer, but him labor with his hands, performing what is good, so he may have something to give to whom has need. What's he saying there is, listen, don't just live your life in a way that you consume everything. That's the old man. Live yourself in such a way that you have excess so that you can give to those who have legitimate needs. That's holiness. That's the two sides of holiness, the putting off and the putting on. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Man, love you guys. Have a great day. Be safe out there, but be bold for Christ. Love you. Talk to you soon.